Easter Sunday, April 1459. The grand hall of the princely palace in Târgoviște is filled with Wallachia's most powerful boyars, nobles dressed in silk and velvet, laughing, drinking wine, celebrating the ascension of their new prince. They believe they have installed another puppet ruler, a young man they can control like they controlled his predecessors. The tables are loaded with roasted meats and honeyed pastries. Musicians play. Children run through the corridors. It is a feast, a celebration. Then the doors slam shut. Soldiers pour into the hall, surrounding the nobles. Prince Vlad Dracula stands, raising his hand for silence. The laughter dies. He speaks. His voice is calm, measured, terrifying. He asks a single question: how many princes have you boyars murdered in your lifetimes? Some nobles answer truthfully, others lie. It does not matter, Vlad already knows the answer. And by dawn, 500 nobles will be impaled on stakes surrounding the city, their screams echoing across Wallachia as a new age of terror begins. How does a massacre become policy? How does revenge transform into a system of control? And was Vlad a monster who crossed every moral line, or a ruler who understood that in Wallachia, only absolute terror could break absolute corruption? The year is 1447. Vlad is 16 years old when his world ends. His father, Vlad III Dracula, ruler of Wallachia, is betrayed by the boyar class and Hungarian allies. A mob drags him from his fortress and buries him alive in the marshes near Balteni. Vlad's older brother, Mircea, is captured, blinded with red-hot stakes, and buried alive alongside their father. The boyars who orchestrate this, the great families of Wallachia who have been installing and deposing princes for decades, celebrate. Another Dracula eliminated, another opportunity to sell the throne to the highest bidder. Vlad escapes. He flees to Moldavia, then to Transylvania, living in exile, watching from across the border as Wallachia descends into chaos. Over the next 12 years, 7 different princes rule Wallachia. 7, some last months, some last weeks. The boyars control everything, auctioning the throne to whoever pays the most, bleeding the country dry while enriching themselves. And Vlad remembers every name, every family, every boyar who stood by while his father and brother were murdered. Before diving into this story of calculated vengeance, if you enjoy learning about the moments when history crossed the line between justice and horror, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these dark chapters together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared fascination with the rulers who rewrote the rules of power. By 1456, Vlad has support. John Hunyadi, the White Knight of Hungary, backs him as a counterweight to Ottoman influence. Vlad invades Wallachia with a small army, defeats the current prince, and claims the throne. He is 25 years old. He has spent 12 years preparing for this moment, and he has a list. The boyars initially welcome him. They believe Vlad will be like every other prince, dependent on their support, vulnerable to their conspiracies, controllable. They offer him their loyalty, their resources, their daughters in marriage. Vlad accepts. He smiles. He plays the grateful young ruler, and he plans. The first 2 years of Vlad's reign are quiet. He rebuilds the army. He fortifies southern border defenses against the Ottomans. He pays tribute to Sultan Mehmed II to buy time. The boyars relax. This prince seems manageable. He executes a few criminals, enforces some laws, but nothing dramatic. Nothing that suggests what is coming, but Vlad is watching. His spies infiltrate every boyar household, recording conversations, tracking alliances, identifying which families participated in his father's murder. He builds loyalty among the lower classes, peasants, merchants, minor nobles, by enforcing laws equally, punishing boyar corruption, and protecting trade routes. These are not the actions of a puppet prince. These are the actions of a man consolidating power. And in early 1459, Vlad decides the time has come. The date is April 1459, Easter Sunday. Vlad issues invitations to all the great boyar families of Wallachia. The message is formal, respectful. The prince requests their presence at Târgoviște for a grand celebration, a reaffirmation of loyalty, a religious feast marking the resurrection of Christ, and a banquet to honor the nobles who have served Wallachia for generations. Attendance is expected. Absence would be an insult. The boyars arrive by the hundreds. They bring their families, wives, children, elderly parents. They wear their finest clothes, displaying wealth accumulated through decades of corruption. They gossip about which families will gain more influence, who will marry whom, how they will manage the young prince's inevitable missteps. They see this as a victory lap, a celebration of their power. They have no idea what Vlad has planned. The feast begins in the afternoon. The great hall of the palace is packed with over 500 nobles and their families. Long tables groan under the weight of food: roasted boar, venison, river fish, bread, wine. Servants circulate constantly. Musicians play traditional songs. Vlad sits at the head table, flanked by his closest advisors watching. His face shows nothing. As the sun sets, Vlad stands. The hall falls silent. He raises a goblet and makes a toast to Wallachia, to the strength of its people, to the wisdom of its nobles. The boyars cheer, raising their own cups. Then Vlad asks his question: "How many princes have you seen in your lifetimes?" The nobles laugh nervously, some boast. One old boyar brags that he has personally witnessed 7 princes crowned and deposed. Others nod, confirming similar numbers. They think Vlad is mocking the instability, perhaps building to a speech about unity. They are wrong. Vlad's voice remains calm. He explains that this instability, this endless cycle of murdered princes and sold thrones, is why Wallachia is weak. He names his father. He names his brother. He asks which families participated in their murders. Silence falls. Nobles glance at each other, confused, frightened. Some try to leave. The doors are already barred. Soldiers enter. Not dozens, hundreds. They surround the hall, weapons drawn. Vlad gives the order: seize them, all of them. What follows is systematic. Vlad's men separate the boyars into groups based on age and guilt. The elderly nobles, those who personally participated in murdering Vlad's father, are dragged outside immediately. The middle-aged boyars, those who inherited power from their traitorous parents, are held inside. The young nobles and their families are separated and guarded. Outside the palace, carpenters have been working for days. Stakes, hundreds of them, sharpened to points, planted in concentric circles around Târgoviște, arranged so that impaled victims will be visible from every approach to the city. The executions begin at sunset and continue through the night. The impalement process is horrifying and precise. Victims are stripped, laid on tables, and have blunt wooden stakes inserted vertically through their bodies, entering the rectum and exiting near the shoulder or neck. The stake is deliberately rounded, not sharp, to avoid piercing vital organs immediately. This extends suffering from hours to sometimes days. The stakes are then planted upright, displaying the victims in various stages of dying. Vlad personally oversees the process. According to chronicles, he walks among the dying, observing, taking notes, ensuring his men follow the correct procedure. He is not sadistic in the sense of enjoying suffering. He is methodical. This is policy, not passion. Each impaled boyar is a message. By dawn, the oldest and most guilty nobles are dead or dying on the stakes. Estimates vary, but contemporary sources suggest between 200 and 300 executed in the first wave. The survivors, younger nobles, their wives and families, are held in the palace, forced to watch, forced to understand what defying Vlad means. Then Vlad gives his second order: march them to Ponari. Ponari Castle is a ruined fortress 50 miles north of Târgoviște, perched on cliffs above the Arges River. It was abandoned years ago, its walls crumbling, its towers collapsing. Vlad decides to rebuild it, and the surviving boyars will be his labor force. The march begins immediately. Over 200 nobles, men and women still dressed in their Easter finery, are forced to walk 50 miles through mountains, carrying tools, dragging supplies. No rest, no food beyond what they can forage. Guards with whips ensure compliance. Many collapse from exhaustion, some die on the road. Their bodies are left where they fall. At Ponari, the work begins. The nobles, aristocrats who have never performed manual labor, are forced to rebuild walls, carry stones, mix mortar. They work from dawn to dusk, sleeping on cold ground, eating scraps. Vlad visits periodically, inspecting progress, executing anyone who slows down or complains. The rebuilding takes months. By the time Ponari is complete, fewer than half the nobles who began the march are still alive. The survivors are broken, physically, psychologically, spiritually. Vlad releases them, sending them back to their estates with a message: tell everyone what happens to boyars who think they can control princes. If you're finding this story of calculated terror as disturbing and fascinating as I am, a like really helps share these forgotten histories with more people who need to understand that sometimes the line between justice and atrocity is defined by perspective. The Easter massacre fundamentally changes Wallachia. The boyar class is decimated. The great families who controlled the throne for generations are either dead, enslaved, or terrified into submission. The power vacuum is filled by Vlad's own appointees, lesser nobles, commoners promoted for loyalty, foreign advisors who owe him everything. For the next 6 years, Vlad rules with absolute authority. He enforces laws ruthlessly. Theft is punished with impalement. Lying is punished with impalement. Infidelity, corruption, disloyalty, all punished the same way. Chronicles describe forests of impaled criminals lining roads, rotting bodies left on display for months as warnings. The terror works, trade flourishes because merchants know the roads are safe. Corruption plummets because officials fear Vlad more than they love bribes. The Ottoman Empire avoids major invasions because they know Vlad will fight with apocalyptic brutality. Wallachia under Vlad is stable in a way it has not been for generations, but it is stability built on mass graves and psychological trauma. The question modern historians debate is whether the Easter massacre was justified revenge or psychopathic cruelty. The Boyars had murdered Vlad's family, betrayed Wallachia repeatedly, and destabilized the country for personal profit. From that perspective, Vlad's actions are comprehensible, harsh but necessary to break a corrupt system. He was eliminating an entrenched elite that made good governance impossible, but 500 people. Many of them women and children who had committed no crimes beyond being born into the wrong families, forced labor that killed hundreds more, executions designed to maximize suffering. At what point does justice become sadism? At what point does breaking a system require becoming worse than the system itself? Vlad's own contemporaries were divided. Western European sources describe him as a monster, a bloodthirsty tyrant who killed for pleasure. Eastern European sources describe him as a strong ruler who brought order to chaos. Ottoman sources describe him as a worthy enemy, brutal but effective. The truth is probably all of these things simultaneously. The legacy of the Easter massacre is complex. It established Vlad as one of history's most feared rulers, a man whose name still evokes terror 6 centuries later. But it also proved that terror as policy has limits. By 1462, Vlad's brutality had alienated potential allies. When the Ottomans invaded with overwhelming force, Hungarian support never materialized. Vlad was deposed, imprisoned, and eventually killed. The boyar families he tried to eliminate gradually returned to power. Within a generation, Wallachia was back to its old pattern of corruption and instability. So was it worth it? Did the Easter massacre accomplish anything lasting, or was it just a temporary pause in an endless cycle of violence? Today, in Târgoviște, there is a statue of Vlad Dracula. He stands in armor, sword in hand, overlooking the modern city built on the ruins of the old one. Tour guides tell sanitized stories about the prince who fought the Ottomans, who defended Christendom, who brought law and order to Wallachia. They mention the impalement, but frame it as harsh justice against criminals. They rarely mention Easter 1459. They rarely mention the 500 nobles impaled in a single night. They rarely mention the surviving nobles forced to rebuild Ponari until they died from exhaustion. That part of Vlad's story is too dark, too uncomfortable, too difficult to reconcile with the heroic legend. But the dark parts are the true parts. The parts that reveal what power costs, what revenge demands, and what happens when a traumatized young man gains absolute authority and uses it to repay every betrayal he suffered. If you found this story of revenge and terror as complex as I did, please give this video a like. It really helps the algorithm share this hidden history with more people who deserve to know that sometimes history's most celebrated heroes committed acts that would horrify us today. And if you want to dive deeper into the rulers who rewrote the rules of power, the massacres that changed nations, and the forgotten chapters that textbooks sanitize, make sure you're subscribed. I have a question for you to answer in the comments. If you had been Vlad, after watching your father and brother murdered by corrupt nobles, would you have done what he did at Easter 1459, or would you have found another way to break their power? I read every comment, and I'd love to hear whether you think mass violence can ever be justified as a tool of state building. Next time, we're uncovering the story of the queen who poisoned half her court, ruled from behind a regency, and was eventually burned alive by the nobles she tried to control, proving that sometimes the most dangerous rulers are the ones history tries hardest to erase. You won't want to miss it. Easter Sunday, 1459. 500 nobles impaled on stakes surrounding Târgoviște, their bodies displayed as warnings visible for miles. It was not justice. It was not madness. It was calculated terror used to shatter a system that had made governance impossible. Vlad Dracula understood something fundamental about power, that sometimes, to build something new, you must first destroy what came before so completely that it can never return. The Boyars who survived told the story for generations. And in those stories, Vlad became legend, not a hero, not a villain, but something more terrifying. A ruler who proved that the line between savior and monster is drawn by whoever survives to write the history.